Hello.
Hi, Prime Minister Jacobs. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning to you as well. Good morning.
All right, we're kicking off strong, Madam Prime Minister. So we're beginning with our interview. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, and for my dear friend, Ambassador Faturi, who's joining us later, good early morning. My name is Matt Tranchen, and I serve as president of March for Science. I also have the privilege of serving as president of the Island Resilience Partnership. I am here joined by my colleague and friend, Hita Lakhani, Global South Focal Point for Youngo, the official youth constituency of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Hita, how are you, my friend?
Hi, Matt. I'm doing great. Thank you for having me. How are you?
I'm well. So for folks who are tuning in, March for Science launched on Earth Day in 2017 in 600 cities around the world. Since then, we've evolved into a year-round advocacy organization fighting on behalf of science-informed public policy. And along with the Island Resilience Partnership, which structured public-private partnership to help governments achieve their climate goals, we joined forces with Youngo and AOSIS on the Science Not Silence campaign, which was launched at the conclusion of COP25 in Madrid, with Ambassador Faturi, now High Commissioner Faturi, who will be joining us later. This entire campaign was built around the IPCC 1.5 degree report. For those not fully up to date on all the acronyms that take place in the climate and island space, the IPCC is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. It's the official UN body of climate science. And at the end of 2018, they issued the 1.5 degree special report, which was actually commissioned on behalf of AOSIS, the Alliance of Small Island States, and those island governments who, when the Paris Agreement concluded, called for a better understanding of what the world would look like at 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial warming levels. And that report was groundbreaking and it was devastating. Hita, do you remember where you were when the 1.5 degree report came out and how that impacted your climate advocacy?
Yeah, I was actually interning at that point, working on a policy brief. And when that came out, of course, it was very shocking to see what the differences were. A 0.5 degree difference really doesn't sound that big when you just talk about it. But when you see the science, when you see the impacts, I think that really hit us hard. But what was even worse was a few months later when we went to COP and we saw how the report was, or the science was actually not being recognized, was being put down by countries because they were vested interests. And I think this was something that really stuck with me even until today, which is almost 3 years after the report has been out.
Yeah, well, and that's, as devastating as the implications of the 1.5 degree report were, perhaps as devastating politically was that report was blocked from being formally welcomed at COP. And so March for Science, Island Resilience Partnership, AOSIS, Youngo banded together and called on governments around the world to publicly champion that 1.5 degree report. And to date, I believe 21 countries have done so. And so there's a lot of momentum around this, which really isn't just a symbolic victory for the climate movement, but it helps redefine success for governments that are actually trying to achieve climate goals and understanding what they need to achieve with regard to climate mitigation and climate adaptation and why. And that's why we're so excited for our first guest who will be joining us for the Unite Behind the Science panel. And that is Honorary Prime Minister Silveria Jacobs. Now, before we bring her on, this is the Prime Minister for St. Martin on the Dutch side, we'd like to play a video that helps set this stage for you to better understand what kind of leader she is and has been with the world facing the twin crises of the coronavirus pandemic and the climate crisis. So with no further ado, kindly play the video.
Stop moving. Simply stop moving. If you do not have the type of bread you like in your house, eat crackers. If you do not have bread, eat cereal. Eat oats, sardines. You're supposed to have a 2-week supply for hurricane. And at the beginning of this, I said, prepare your disaster kit as if you would for a hurricane. That meant some people went out and buy toilet paper and water. The water is not going to stop. The toilet paper is still in the stores. What you need is food. You need to ensure that you have food, because if I have to take everybody who is saying that at least 50%, shut it down completely, regardless. Food will also not be possible for 2 weeks for you to buy, because the workers in the food market will also have to stay home. Keep that in mind. But do not run to the supermarket today to buy for a month. As I said, buy for 1 to 2 weeks.
I love that. And you know, I think back on where I was 18 months ago, right when the pandemic began, and there were a lot of different versions of leadership at that time. And I'm saying that as an American. I think watching a head of state speak so clearly, forcefully, pragmatically to citizens in the midst of that crisis, it was inspiring at the time, and it's inspiring to this day. But you know, with that, we would love to have the Prime Minister, Silveria Jacobs, join us. Madam Prime Minister, how are you this morning?
Good morning. Good morning. It's always a shock to see that. Good morning to you, Mr. Transhin. Good morning to also Lakmi. And all those who are tuned in, it's whenever I see it, I'm shocked again, because it was indeed a tough time last year.
Absolutely. Prime Minister, it's an absolute pleasure to have you with us. And just echoing what Matt said, the video is extremely strong, frank, and very simply put, right? It's very simply put for people to understand what needs to be done and that they shouldn't be panic buying no matter what it is. And I think just taking from this, seeing how you've guided the citizens of St. Martin through the pandemic, I want to understand, what is the role that science has played in informing your government's decisions and the approach that you've taken through these times?
Thank you, Ms. Lakani. I really, governments all over the world did not even know the magnitude of what we were dealing with. And when COVID-19 touched our shores, as a government, we activated our Emergency Operations Center. And as you can tell from the video, that Emergency Operations Center, EOC, usually has had a lot of experience with hurricanes. And so our population knows what it is to go on a go slow, on a shutdown for a period of time. So that's what I was trying to remind them, because there was a lot of pushback. But we'd not had a lot of experience with different types of disasters. And so we had to depend very strongly on our medical experts here and abroad for expertise in dealing with and mitigating the spread of the virus. It taught us many, many things. COVID-19, one of which is that we should be more innovative, not only as individuals, but as a country. And the world and us relied on science in the form of the tests, in forms of the vaccines, in terms of the changing protocols. And over the past 18 months, or let's say 18 months later, St. Martin is still coping with this virus. We've remained, for the most part, open since that lockdown last year, and we continue to institute science-based mitigating measures to ensure the safety of our residents and visitors. So as Prime Minister and Minister of General Affairs in charge of the emergency operations, I will continue to rely upon science and the expertise afforded to our people so that we can continue to keep our active cases at a manageable level and create herd immunity with the vaccine.
Sounds like a sound strategy. I love that. I'm curious, Prime Minister, you mentioned how given St. Martin's emergency operations system, that kind of helps set the stage to better understand how to deal with not so much a climate crisis, but the pandemic. As the world heads into COP26 in Glasgow, I'm curious, obviously governments around the world are having to address the resilience of their infrastructure, public health, their economies. What lessons do you hope your counterparts around the world are actually taking away from how the pandemic has been addressed and actually use that to inform how governments should be addressing the climate crisis?
Well, first of all, I must say that it's almost heartwarming to see that larger countries also now understand what it is to deal with something that when we as small island development states get hit with hurricanes and the like, we're totally cut off. We're totally, dependent on outside. And now with the worldwide pandemic, it shows that leaders around the world, we must come together to deal with what is basically affecting the entire world. Climate change, we must tackle this together. And I believe that the climate change conference will help to accelerate those actions towards a greener globe. During the height of the pandemic, what we saw was a global reduction in the CO2 emissions. So because we all had to sit still, as I said, stand still, stop moving, there was less travel, there was less movement, there was less production of the CO2. So I must say those sources vary. It has been estimated that by spring 2020 and spring 21, the emissions had fallen from 7 to 17, between 7 and 17%. So scientists estimate that the period was too short to have a long-term impact on the environment. And given the recent resurgence of our, of course, pre-pandemic patterns and consumption patterns, this small period of time at least confirms that the link between climate change and human behavior. So we are the ones on this planet negatively impacting the planet. And so therefore we must come together. And I focused in that time on going back to nature, growing and spending more time with family. And of course, now I see that we're going back to just the rat race. And I think we really have to focus on how we can do so, earn money, do what we have to do, but together as leaders, advocate for methods and technologies that directly lessen our impact on the environment. So concessional financing towards consumption and energy transformation is critical in this regard, and partnerships towards such a important for small development countries such as St. Martin. So I call on leaders participating in the upcoming COP to take this consideration, especially considering the impact in particularly on the global south.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think just, that makes me think when we talk about climate change, a lot of the importance is put on emission reduction, on climate mitigation, which is absolutely necessary. We do need to cut down on emissions. But from the SIDS, even all combined together, the SIDS barely even emit 1% of the global emissions. So I think here for you, probably the focus is more on climate adaptation, whether it's adapting to a pandemic or adapting to the climate crisis. And just like you mentioned, you have strategies, you have plans in place for hurricanes, but how has this helped build your climate adaptation plans?
Well, St. Martin has just commemorated 4 years since Hurricanes Irma and Maria devastated our island on September 6, 2017. As our people and St. Martin's economy continues to recover, and then from that and from the negative effects of COVID-19, I must say that we continue to press forward. In doing so, our government has taken note of the fact that we depend not only on ourselves, but also on instruments that can aid us in moving forward with the effects of the climate change. So we've had, in order to adapt to this, prioritize investments in research and development to build a more sustainable St. Martin. This is, of course, key to our survival. As you know, we get the negative effects of the increased global warming with the more stronger and stronger hurricanes. So we are trying to build our sustainability and resilience and how we handle these shocks. This is necessary for our survival. This action will assist us in becoming more adaptive and climate smart so that we are able to better respond to the effects. But even though we're more focused on the adaptive, our people are becoming so much more keen on how we're using the planet. And even though we are only contributing to the less than 1%, we still feel that as global citizens, we should also ensure that we're working on that part as well.
Well, Madam Prime Minister, that sets the stage for our last question. Of course, last month, you announced a public-private partnership to accelerate St. Martin's transition to renewable energy and resilient infrastructure. This came out of an event a couple years ago where a St. Martin delegation traveled to Dallas, Texas, where I am based, for the Island Resilience Forum at EarthX, where actually we announced the partnership with the independent state of Samoa. And that was really the beginning of St. Martin and your team, which had actually traveled to Apia for the Samoa Pathway the year before to better understand those best practices and lessons learned in the world of sustainable development. Would love to hear about that partnership and really better understand why, with your administration, you've prioritized the transition to clean energy, but also resilient infrastructure.
Thank you so much for that question. Government of St. Martin did indeed launch this partnership with Grid Market and Island Resilience Partnership, as we too believe earnestly in the possibility of transforming our energy infrastructure. It's also a great part of St. Martin's national development vision, which we're working diligently to execute. Considering the events of Hurricanes Irma and Maria in 2017, and now, of course, our COVID-19 worldwide pandemic, which has had such devastating economic effect as well, the transformation to renewable energy is imperative, not only against natural disasters, but also now seeing that economic disasters can happen at a drop of a hat and are currently the order of the day. St. Martin remains committed to also the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, such as 3 of which ensuring, number 7, ensuring access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all, and 11, making cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. 17, strengthen the means of implementation and revitalize the global partnership for sustainable development. So with our focus on those 3, we really move forward diligently, and I must thank my team for that, to push forward another strategic approach deployed by us through the RESIMBID program of the European Union, which also focuses on 3 areas: resilience, energy, and marine biodiversity, for which we continue to seek synergies for a holistic approach to climate change. So today, we stand with our partners, Grid Market, Island Resilience Partnership, and we seek to become a pioneer SIDS in energy transformation. So I encourage even more donors to seek similar partnerships for the region so that we who feel it the most can continue with our plight against climate change.
I love that, Prime Minister. And, I want to use this opportunity to give a special shout out to your team, Angelique Gums and Patrice Gums, who really this partnership would not have happened if not for their leadership and helping spearhead the way. But, I think what's really exciting about all of this is, this is a partnership that's been structured with the private sector, with the nonprofit sector, with governments, all leveraging their unique strengths to find ways to help governments utilize their data to achieve climate goals at no risk to governments. And I think that's such a critical aspect of looking at how we can create partnerships that can be replicated and scaled. So just I'm so appreciative of your leadership and for joining us this morning. Thank you so much, Prime Minister.
I totally appreciate any opportunity to be a part of anything that is moving us globally in a better direction. And again, kudos to Angelique and Patrice. Continue the hard work.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much. And with that, we will transition to our next segment. Want to thank the Prime Minister for joining us early on a Sunday morning. And also thank my colleague and counterpart, Hita, who will be joining us later in the event. But now would like to bring on and introduce our next panel. We're going to be joined by 4 total rock stars in this space who I feel privileged to be able to call all 4 of them dear friends of mine. First, would like to introduce High Commissioner Faturi. Faturi is stationed in Fiji, where he leads the independent state of Samoa's diplomatic efforts. He previously served as the United Nations ambassador for Samoa for over a decade and was instrumental in creating the partnership between Island Resilience Partnership, Grid Market, and Samoa, which really became the model for this partnership that we're beginning to see replicated around the world, most recently in St. Martin. He also happened to launch the Science Not Silence campaign personally in Madrid at the conclusion of COP25. Ambassador Faturi, good to see you, sir. Thank you for joining us. Miss Francesca Cesar serves as the first secretary for the permanent mission of the Republic of Malta, where she coordinates the SID steering committee, which Malta actually co-chairs along with Antigua and Barbuda, which happens to be the chair of AOSIS. That is but one hat that Francesca wears. The first time I came across Francesca was during the SID's steering committee global multi-stakeholder event from last year. I'm sure a lot of people tuning in probably watched that if you follow all of the critical high-level dialogues. What made that event so interesting was the co-chairs both lost internet access, and Francesca was thrown in the deep end with no advance notice and brilliantly pulled the entire thing off. Francesca, thank you so much for joining us as well. We also have Dr. Angus Friday. Dr. Friday, thank you so much for joining us. He is the former UN ambassador for Grenada, former chair of the Alliance of Small Island States, former World Bank Oceans representative, the Blue Economy Director at Wade Institute, chair of the Island Resilience Partnership. There are 10 other titles that we don't have time for to cover what Angus has represented in the island space, but his institutional knowledge on the historic role of SIDS addressing the climate crisis is incredibly valuable and insightful to our conversation today. Dr. Friday, thank you so much for joining us. And last but not least, my dear friend, Nick Davis, CEO of Grid Market, the artificial intelligence company based in New York City that spun out of the Hurricane Sandy task force. Nick and his company have built partnerships with island governments all around the world, from Palau to St. Martin to Samoa to the Kingdom of Tonga. He is a great representative of the private sector in addressing the climate goals of SIDS, because his company is actually built by design on the principle of leaving no one behind. And that's why, and we'll get into how his AI platform achieves this, but essentially it ensures that when they work with governments, not only the most densely populated parts of countries are focused on for transition to renewable energy, which within the private sector, that is the most lucrative opportunity, but actually leverages those opportunities to provide the same accessibility, price point, and in clean energy opportunities for a government's entire population. So Nick, really appreciate you joining as well. And actually, that's where I'd love to start. Nick, we just spoke with Prime Minister Jacobs about the about the St. Martin partnership. Of course, this is built out of the partnerships that Grid Market and the Island Resilience Partnership have created in the Pacific. Would love for you to kind of walk through the Grid Market platform and the partnership that's been created to help people understand how is it that the private sector and the philanthropic sector have found a way to team up and help governments better understand how best they can use their data to achieve their climate goals.
Matt, thank you so much for the introduction, and thanks to all my friends and friendly faces I see here on this call. Good to see you, High Commissioner Faturi, of course, and Prime Minister Jacobs. Fantastic to hear you as well, and Matt, of course. Good to be on another panel with you, and to James and the hosts of this. This is a fantastic event with, I guess, tens of thousands of people tuning in this year. So really, congratulations. I'm probably the least interesting person on this call here, so I'll try to be as brief as possible as I go. We're really a technology company, and when you look at how energy projects have historically been accomplished across the world, whether it's businesses in the United States or Europe, or whether it's small island developing states doing their first kind of few energy projects, things have been done historically in a piecemeal kind of way, one at a time, for instance. So you look at projects in the Pacific, and many small island states have really done experimental projects, small things that are backed by governments from the US to Asia and to the EU and elsewhere. And I think those projects were appreciated, but what those small projects don't do is really build capacity for the local population to take over their own energy futures and own energy independence, and truly maximize the entire energy value across their country to achieve really three key pillars. And those pillars are cost savings, most importantly, because SIDS are held hostage to incredibly high diesel or heavy fuel oil costs. Next, these carbon and environmental objectives. There have been some Pacific leaders in the past who have said that smokestacks shouldn't be in paradise, and we tend to agree with that philosophy. And thirdly is resilience in the face of weather intensification. And you look at St. Martin, for instance, in the Caribbean, which is one of the most powerful industrialized states with casinos and tourist infrastructure and really great assets in the Caribbean. The vulnerabilities, having a heavy fuel oil plant produce the majority of generation to the country, sitting on the beach is really very risky. So there's a great opportunity to look at all of the energy assets across an entire country rather than just the low-hanging fruit. See how every building can produce and manage and optimize energy use, and take a holistic approach to an energy transformation that really accelerates those phases rather than doing one solar project and leaving the need for batteries until the next phase, or doing one kind of big wind project, but really not approaching the building by building and customer by customer segment in order to create an optimization and truly drop the cost of energy to hit a carbon objective and really disaggregate and create a resilient grid. That's what's missing in a lot of these places. So very simply.
And Nick, to that point, I think oftentimes when people talk about climate goals and energy, it's usually in the context of climate mitigation. The future of energy is transitioning to renewable, but it's also the future of energy is distributed. And I think not enough attention's given to climate adaptation in the context of the energy sector. And you mentioned sometimes when island governments are working with the private sector to do a big wind farm or big solar store, it will juice up and hit some clean energy goals, but it leaves a lack of storage to the next big project, which is usually prohibitively expensive. Yeah. And so you find yourself, yes, we're getting closer to the clean energy goals, but from an adaptation standpoint, it leaves governments incredibly vulnerable. And so part of how the platform works with Grid Market is finding ways to achieve not just those clean energy goals, but those climate adaptation goals as well. That's right.
That's exactly right. And we are really looking for technology partners. We're looking to coalesce more capital markets and drive investments into those technologies. And really what our platform does well is, again, identify every single opportunity for energy on a parcel by parcel and building by building basis, and then coalesce global technologies and partners to service those technologies and drive economies of scale, which is often missing in a lot of islands. So,
And this is,
I encourage technology partners who want to participate in these types of projects to reach out and really join, as well as capital market partners, because there's huge opportunity here, and people are missing out by not participating and helping.
Well, and having just spoken with Prime Minister Jacobs, I know the partnership with IRP, Grid Market, and the St. Martin government. Grid Market is actually leading the RFP process for the St. Martin government. So any energy company, financial institution that's interested in participating in St. Martin's national energy transition, please work directly with Grid Market as they spearhead that and work hand in hand with the St. Martin government in identifying these opportunities. But this is actually where I would love to bring in High Commissioner Faturi into this conversation, really because this partnership came out of a convening that took place in Apia back in 2018. This was the Samoa Pathway Interregional Summit that had taken place right before the midway points of the high-level review. And High Commissioner Faturi would love for some background on the Samoa Pathway, which of course launched in 2014. Can you give some background into why that came to be, and what are the objectives over the next, I believe it was a 10-year commitment amongst SIDS with regard to sustainable development goals?
Thank you, Matt. And it's exactly 2:30 a.m. Fiji time. But as far as I'm concerned, and as far as Samoa is concerned, any time is the right time, because we carry the same load and more hands make light work. So very grateful to be part of this conversation. Well, Samoa was privileged to host the 2014 UN SIDS conference. And when we were looking for an overarching theme, we decided that we should have the sustainable development of SIDS through genuine and durable partnerships. Why? Because partnerships is Samoa's DNA. It reflects our own journey as a small island developing state that gained independence in 1962. But I think more importantly, the message for us is that when it comes to partnerships, every partnership matters. None is subservient or less important than the other, because the totality of all partnerships that you have at any given point in time reflects where your company is at. So for us, genuine partners are those who will be willing to help and assist you, and durable partners are those who will be with you no matter what. They will be with you in the highs and lows of your journey as a small island developing state. But most importantly, the knowledge that you have partners with you sometimes allow you to take a leap of faith and do things that under normal circumstances, you probably won't do it on your own. So that is the strength of partnership. And that is why we purposely use that as the overarching theme. Because we look at all SIDS at the end of the day, I think they need to work with partners to be able to try and find solutions to address the impacts of climate change. I think importantly also, maybe what is not known so widely is that we call the outcome document the Samoa Pathway. Samoa because that's the name of the host country, but I think more importantly, it was an acronym. Samoa stands for SIDS, Accelerated Modalities of Action. And I think the three important words are accelerated, action, and pathway. So it's not enough just to say that we have this outcome document. Importantly, you need to work with partners so that you can create action. And importantly, you can try and accelerate it so that you can get to the finishing line. So for Samoa, I think every partnership has a point of reference. So it's the theme of the conference. And then there are markers along the way to try and map your progress and journey. You make reference to the midterm review of the Samoa Pathway in 2018. And then there was the FX forum in Dallas itself in 2019, right, where Samoa, Grid Market, and the Island Resilience Partnership signed a memorandum of understanding. I think it's also important to mention that that was the first time ever that there was a sort of an island resilience component of the program. So I think these are all important markers to try and help steer the way. And then I think the other important marker you already alluded to was the launch of the at COP25 in Madrid of the Science Not Silence. So I think these are all important components, but I think that's what the Samoa pathway. And for us, when we signed that MOU, it was a leap of faith. And it was partly because I know you at the personal level, and I also know Nick. And yet, because we felt that was something that was important, so it was a leap of faith. And that's why it's important to have a partnership, but more importantly, to have people at the personal level, because there is no way they will do something that will hurt you.
Right.
And vice versa, because their credibility is underlined also when they assist you. So for us, it was really a test of replicability for other seats to try and emulate. Too often we want to be at the top of the queue, but sometimes it's better to be the second or at the back, because then you can learn from the challenges the other face. And if our partnership is doing something good, how can Dr. Agnes Friday and Renata do it better? Right. So I think that these are some of the reason behind taking this particular approach, because at the end of the day, we need to share. I mean, that's the only way, so that we others can also benefit from our mistakes and our challenges, but more importantly, from some of our successes, so that we don't just keep it to ourselves, but importantly, share it with our other seats.
I love that, High Commissioner. And, of course, Grid Market, IRP, and Samoa kicked off that partnership in 2019. And Grid Market and EPC, the state-owned utility, in the midst of the pandemic, found some really innovative ways to move that project forward with a fleet of drones documenting the entire country and allowing participation from energy companies and financial institutions around the world still actively participate in Samoa's national energy transition, which I know there's going to be some big announcements soon on the state of that partnership and achieving Samoa's NDC goals well ahead of schedule and providing significant savings to the country and people of Samoa. But, High Commissioner, you talk about genuine durable partnerships at the heart of the Samoa pathway. It's a great segue to bring in my friend Francesca to talk about one of the key outcomes of the Samoa pathway, which was the creation of the SIDS Steering Committee, which really helped to create a framework around ensuring that best practices of SIDS, creating partnerships, could be replicated and scaled. And so, Francesca, thank you for joining us. Would love, as one of the co-chairs of the SIDS Steering Committee, to talk about the work that you all have taken on. And then, of course, given your unique bird's eye view of the state of global SIDS partnerships, would love some insights from you about some of the best practices that you're seeing that give you hope about how SIDS are achieving their sustainable development goals.
Yes, thank you, Matt. And it's incredible to be in this conversation with so many varied, esteemed panel speakers. So once again, thank you for the invitation. Indeed, as you rightly said, Malta, together with Antigua Barbuda, have been co-chairing the Steering Committee on Partnerships for SIDS since January 2020. That is when we got appointed by the President of the General Assembly to steer such an important role in the development of sustainable development goals for SIDS. And Malta, indeed, we have quite a historical affinity to SIDS because we were once a small island developing state ourselves. And even though we're no longer a small island developing state, we are still a small island state. And that is why we are pleased to be given this role. And indeed, the objective of the steering committee is the promotion and advocacy of existing partnerships. But even more importantly than that is the creation of new partnerships. And indeed, as High Commissioner Kuturi said, it is indeed important. It's an important component of not only SIDS per se, but what the UN is doing to ensure that partnerships remain on the path towards our 2030 agenda, which right now we are currently in the decade of action. By 2030, we need to accelerate our implementation of all 17 SDGs. And unfortunately, with the pandemic, we've seen for the first time in 30 years a regression on development, an increase in poverty and on all stratas of development, especially for SIDS, which have a varied vulnerability compared to other least developed countries. So in our context in the steering committee, since January 2020, we've utilized as well the virtual component of our work, which became so obvious in our COVID-19 circumstances. And by that, we're able to reach a wider audience. We're able to reach more SIDS, especially from capital. As we know, even from my side, we're a small delegation. We are dependent on the expertise that we have from capital, but more importantly, how we can expand on partnerships to increase that expertise. And in fact, we've had multi-stakeholder dialogues, that is where me and Matt were able to establish contact. And more and truly, the idea of partnerships is important because it is a dignified collaboration. More often than not, we see many discussions on collaboration, but what does it really entail? So we looked into elements which SIDS really push on the agenda of the UN and international community per se, that is climate change, renewable energy transition, food security, which is also very important right now as we move into our next high-level week of the General Assembly, which food security is an important issue on the agenda. The same with tourism. Tourism, I think, not only speaking on my own behalf, on my own country, but also I speak for other states, tourism has been hardly hit in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic. So we saw in the steering committee what best practices, what lessons learned we can establish for SIDS to move forward their economy. On climate change per se, it is interesting because we often see the linkage of climate change on the impact of our oceans. And also as Malta, my own country, we were one of the foremost proponents of establishing the law of the sea back in 1967, when Malta became actually, it was in our early years of being a UN member state. So now moving forward, hopefully if Malta gets elected on the Security Council as well, we are pushing as well discussion on climate and security. We've seen many discussions on this. It is also a priority of the Secretary General, a priority of the current President of the General Assembly. Climate change is not only an environmental issue, it is a multidisciplinary, holistic approach that we require to address it properly. And we are seeing also sea level rise, which is a discussion which regrettably hasn't gained traction as we would like to. So we are hoping that through our role as co-chairs of the steering committee and also as incoming chair of the second committee of the UN, we will be chairs of this committee for this current session. We try to push as much as possible the climate discussion, taking into account our all encompassing work towards COP26, which will be held in Glasgow by the end of this year.
And Francesca, one of the things I've loved kind of watching the evolution of Malta and Antigua and Barbuda's co-chairmanship of the SID steering committee is how you are continuing to innovate. And recently you announced the SIDS Partnership Steering Partnership Awards. Can you give a brief background on that? Because I imagine there are a lot of interested audience members in how best they could participate and apply to be a part of this opportunity to showcase those examples of best practices that would be highlighted in front of a global community.
Yes, indeed, a very recent innovation and a very crafty way as well to gain more partnerships as well is by rewarding existing partnerships. So indeed, in our second tenure of our co-chairing mandate, we have indeed launched the Partnerships Awards. We will get our final authorization of this awards through the General Assembly, through the second committee as well. In a nutshell, the essence of these awards is, I think, a very crafty idea, as I said, to gain more awareness of best practices that unfortunately they do not get the exposure that one would need to. This is open for all SIDS defined by the UN. We're currently working as well with DESA, which is the Department of Economic and Social Affairs of the UN, who have tremendously helped us with the substance of this program. We are hoping to get it launched very soon, and we'll be able to announce the awardees essentially at our next global multi-stakeholder dialogue, which is usually slated during the high-level political forum on sustainable development, which is usually held around July in the UN calendar. So right now we are in development, but we're very excited for the months to come, and we're hoping that as many SIDS partnerships, and not only SIDS but also global partnerships, because it's important, even coming from Malta, which is an EU member state and a Commonwealth country. We want to push as much as possible the partnerships discussion forward.
I love that. I love that. Well, and we mentioned how Malta is co-chairing the SIDS Partnership Steering Committee with Antigua and Barbuda, who also serves as the chair of AOSIS, the Alliance of Small Island States. And with that, I would like to bring in a former chair of AOSIS, Dr. Friday. Angus, how you doing, my friend?
Doing very well, Matt. And let me just join with you in both welcoming and thanking Honorable Prime Minister Jacobs for joining with us this morning. Also great to see my old friend Ambassador Fichuri. Great to see you, and been hearing all the great work that you've been doing. And Nick, great to see you as well. Matt.
Yeah, Dr. Friday, I had a couple of questions lined up for you, but first I just wanted to check in with you. Of course, for those who have been watching the state of the pandemic, Grenada has been hit incredibly hard recently. I think is dealing with the highest per capita rate of infections in the world. You and your family doing safe? Everyone okay?
Yes, we're doing well, thank you. And we sort of got vaccinated quite early on. I think part of the challenge we have is that the overall healthcare program in Grenada was so successful that not enough people have gotten vaccinated, and then we have the Delta variant here now, so we have some challenges on our hands. But we're in lockdown this weekend, so what better place to be than have the virtual island summit with you and others. And let me just give a big shout out to James and his team as well at Island Innovation.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I want to echo that, the sentiments for sure. Well, Dr. Friday, we talk about kind of the state of the climate crisis and looking at partnerships around the world that are helping governments achieve their climate goals. Still a lot of barriers for a lot of governments in finding ways to access the financing, the technology, and the partners in order to achieve success. As we head into COP, and we are less than 2 months away from Glasgow, as a former chair of AOSIS, I'm curious, how should we define success on behalf of SIDS heading into Glasgow? What's realistically possible? And of course, so much of this happens behind closed doors during these international climate change negotiations. What are you hopeful for that gets prioritized in Scotland?
Well, thanks for the question. Look, islands face the classic triple trap of, climate impacts, high cost of fossil fuel importation, and high debt overhang. And now there's a quadruple trap because of COVID and a general reliance on tourism. So islands are really at the brunt of this on so many levels. I think a key thing is to really change the mindset from being one of victim to being one of victors. So increasingly, islands are already at the forefront of climate change. And so it's now vital that they become part of the forefront of the solutions for climate change. And therefore, the means of implementation and the partnerships to be able to do that is going to be so critical. Those things are going to be very, very critical. So we think that islands need to position themselves really as the living laboratories for new technologies, for new solutions, for new ways of deploying ecosystem services and resilience, for deploying new types of technologies for both power generation, distributed grid systems, transportation, and so forth, and climate smart cities as well. And all of this, to underpin all of this, of course, the innovation and continued innovation on new forms of financing and innovative forms of financing is going to be absolutely critical. So for Glasgow, it's going to be very important. We saw the recent IPCC report, Code Red for Humanity. We need to see countries around the world increasing the level of ambition on mitigation. I think that's job number one. If we can't do that, then there's no level of adaptation that is going to save us. So finding ways to level off to level off emissions is going to be absolutely critical. I think in addition to that, the fact of the matter is that climate change is here, and we're seeing the impacts across SIDS around the world. Year after year, with each hurricane season, with droughts and floods we've been seeing. And of course, we're now seeing, in Europe, in the United States, in Russia, the fires, the floods, all sorts of other impacts are beginning to play out as well. So I think the message on climate impacts is really sort of hitting home now. So from that point of view, it's unfortunate, but in a good way, it actually helps to accelerate the pace of the discussions, the sense of urgency that's needed. And so we're hoping that out of Glasgow, we can get some practical partnerships, particularly on the financing side.
So Dr. Friday, I want to jump in on the financing side, because we're seeing with the partnerships that for example IRP and Grid Market have done in Samoa and are doing now in St. Martin and Tonga. We're seeing some of the world's largest energy companies and financial institutions understand that there is a win-win opportunity. The marketplace is at a point where governments can transition, hit their climate goals, and the private sector can still make a strong return. Are you, in terms of those investable opportunities, are you hopeful that family offices, pension funds, philanthropists will begin to also get involved in the financing space and find ways that they too can begin leveraging their resources to help the global energy transition take place?
Well, funny you should raise that. Nigel Topping, who is charged with putting together, bringing the private sector to the table in Glasgow. He was actually just in Grenada, and we were very pleased to see that the British government, as host of Glasgow, have sort of sent Nigel around as an emissary, really, to see how the private sector can work, increasingly closely with small island developing states. And there's a real sense that there is a win-win opportunity here. The work that Grid Market has been doing has really been pioneering, we believe, in terms of, without waiting on multilateral development banks and, and other major institutions. They've really gone ahead and partnered, with Samoa, with St. Martin and others, to pioneer this new way of working, which could help islands to move forward and show themselves up as these living laboratories for, for utility scale solutions as it relates to energy independence and energy resilience.
Nick, would love to bring you back in here. I'm curious from your vantage point in working with governments and some of the largest energy companies in the world. Insurance is an issue that comes up time and time again in trying to structure these partnerships and find ways to hit price points that allow governments not just achieve these goals, but also achieve significant savings in the process. What recommendations would you bring into COP as world leaders get together to try and find ways to mitigate the risk of of private sector industries looking to invest and be a part of these energy transitions?
Yeah, there is a lot of capital in the market from the private side willing to participate in these projects, and capital is what makes these projects cheaper, and that's what brings lower costs of energy and distributed grids to SIDS, to companies in the US, pretty much to everywhere. So one of the main reservations that capital often has when participating in small island development state financings and really facilitating technology transfer and funding is critical outage risk. Things like Category 5 hurricanes and typhoons that can create substantial damage. And it's, what's kind of most critical when you look at opportunities for NGOs and multilaterals and where kind of places like the UN and the World Bank and others should really be playing a role is credit enhancement and backstopping in kind of really emergency situations and kind of catastrophic situations for storm intensity. So, I think what's interesting to see, there's a lot of money from a lot of these organizations going into kind of smaller programs and experimental deployments, and more money than ever going into funding what I would call maybe soft work. And that's great, and it's necessary to kind of facilitate the beginnings of transitions. But now we're kind of in a rush. Every country needs to install these assets as quickly as possible. They need to distribute their grids. They need to reduce risk. So really where these big capital providers should be playing is, rather than acting like private sector funders, they need to be really looking at being, again, credit enhancement vehicles and backstops in the event of cataclysm. And we're going to be seeing more and more intense storms, but let the private sector, let private investors do their work, let locals on the ground have the capacity to build and create their own microgrids and invest in their own technologies, and facilitate that, again, through smart capital protections, credit enhancement, and being the backstop in the event of big storms or big unexpected events, rather than competing with the private sector for different kind of fundings and work. They can really be a facilitator to enhance and allow all that money to be spent.
Francesca, have you seen any partnerships in that spirit that are helping address some of the issues that Nick covered?
Yes, indeed. I must add that closer to October, we'll also be hosting in our co-chairing of the steering committee a webinar on renewable energy and water management. And that would be something which is also very, very useful for delegations, even here at the UN, which then they will be able to convey back home. I think the critical aspect when it comes to what states need to do is really to provide a strategy which has many varied components, that is public, but most importantly, the private sector. And that is something which even us in the steering committee is pushing. Partnerships should be also needs-based. We also need to hear from SIDS what they require, and we'll be able to implement. In fact, carbon neutrality is also one of the 5 major pillars in my own country's economic vision for 2030. We've adopted a low carbon development strategy, which we feel that is important to highlight even for other countries to emulate. It is important in our approach that we integrate mitigation with adaptation. These shouldn't be kept in silos, but should be on the table together and joint in our deliberations. Also, in terms of energy, it is also an issue of security of supply obligations, which we should also have in context when we have to meet our energy requirements. So these are some of the elements which we are looking at when it comes to the whole renewable energy scenario. And also, interestingly enough, even at the coming high-level week of the General Assembly, we'll also be having a high-level dialogue on energy. Earlier this year, we've had a number of ministerial thematic forums on many different aspects, including on SDGs in their totality, but also specifically the energy dimension, and also data and supply of security in general. So it is important that we look at all these elements. And also, one other thing, if I may add, Matt, is the importance of keeping together in the advocacy on science. Science should lead all our strategies, all our policymakers and decision makers, which is even more important, even here at us at the UN, is to ensure that we are guided by the science. And that is why I'm proud as well that Malta, together with AOSIS and other partners, we've signed the Science Not Silence pledge. And I also take this opportunity to call upon other member states to really join us and advocate forward and carry forward this discussion towards COP. It is crucial that we get our decision makers, our policymakers, our leaders to really get grounded on the discussion and ensure that the code red that we've all been hearing throughout the decades, but even more so now with the recent IPCC report, we really have to get our discussion forward, but with tangible actions. And hopefully through our partnerships discussions at the UN, we'll be able to highlight more clearly what SIDS and developed partners are doing together to ensure that no one is left behind. And in the context of the current COVID-19 pandemic, we also build back better, greener, and bluer.
Unite behind the science. Yes, Francesca. And of course, you know, Malta was one of the first countries to join the Science Not Silence campaign, the very first EU member, which was, you know, it was huge, you know, for the campaign. You know, there are a majority of the countries who have joined are small island developing states. And so for Malta to step up, and, you know, a special thank you to Ambassador Fraser for her leadership on a global stage, advocating for other governments around the world to support the movement that our dear friend and fellow panelist, High Commissioner Fattori, began when, you know, he announced the Science Not Silence campaign on the margins of COP25 in Madrid. And so, Fattori, you know, we talk about science and the kind of the impact that the 1.5 degree report had on the climate movement. Of course, just a couple months ago, if less, the most recent IPCC report was released, which, you know, Dr. Friday referred to as the red alert. I'm curious how, you know, you recently participated in the Climate Vulnerable Forum with other Pacific small island developing states. How has that IPCC report and news informed how SIDS are continuing to work together and collaborate within the climate movement?
Well, I think it validated our concern all along. You know, when we first said that there was such thing as climate change, others laugh at us and say, give us the science. And when the scientists, most of them by any way are not from small island developing states. So when the best scientists say that there is such a thing as climate change, and then when they have the 1.5 degrees Celsius report, they won't even welcome it. They only noted it. So, yeah. I mean, it doesn't surprise us. We have been saying this, and then of course everybody say, you speak from a high moral ground. And we've been doing that. And then when we look around, there's nobody in the room. We can bail in the face and nobody listens.
Right.
But I think that this is my unsolicited advice, based on also on my experience since returning to the Pacific. Sometimes the left hand should know what the right hand is doing. Why? I attended some ministerial meetings, and when there was reference to one of the Climate Vulnerable Forum members was trying to propose in terms of levying a tax on maritime shipping, immediately they say no way, and this was still from within the Pacific. So my unsolicited advice would be this: climate change is underpinned by science. There's no two way about it. And we are grateful for the advocacy and their campaign by the Science Not Silence and also the March for Science. This is priceless, and we can't put a value on that. So obviously, climate change is firmly grounded on science. But I think what we really need are real and transformative climate action to be led by true and genuine political leaders who are willing to lead from the front and not be led, and who are willing to walk the talk.
Yeah.
Not just to to win political highlights out of it. So the left hand should know what the right. So if a leader is going to announce in COP26, we're going to do this, it's not enough to just to announce it. We want the means to implement that announcement.
Right.
Because some countries, they keep raising our expectations, and we go to COP after COP after COP with the same song and dance. And then at the end of the day, we look around, it's mainly just the vulnerable countries amongst themselves saying that, trying to do the heavy lifting. So that will be my solution, and it's underpinned in terms of the genuine and durable partnerships. If we really mean what we do, why don't we approach the way we approach COVID-19?
Yeah.
There was a lot of goodwill. Why? Because those countries, it was a matter of life and death. Unlike climate change, it's probably not happening as severely as it is, in terms of what's been the case in the Pacific and also in SEAs. So that's what we need. True partnership where leaders lead from the front. And if we say we're going to do this, no, it's not just an election platform.
Yeah.
They really mean it, and that they will put the resources so that we can really see some transformational impact on the ground, so that maybe we don't need any more COPs. Because we're only meeting to try and look for solutions. But if we had resolved this, we wouldn't even have COP26. So let's be as frank as possible. We can have the advocacy, and we should. But importantly, it should be underpinned by real, solid action on the ground. That's where the heavy lifting is going to happen. And that's where true statements and true leaders will emerge. Not by what they say at COP26. It's what they are doing, because at the end of the day, I always maintain charity starts at home, and you have to put your own house in order first before you start lecturing to others or saying to others how to live their lives. So that's
Right.
my advice, and seeing it also in our region. I think it's important for us to be singing from the same song sheet, rather than some saying we need to do this, telling others what to do, and you have your other group saying, no, we can't do that. It's going to impact this way and that way on us.
No, I love that. I love that, High Commissioner. I think it's a perfect way to conclude this segment of our session. And you talk about genuine, durable partnerships. I also want to not just thank you, High Commissioner Faturi, for your leadership in the partnership to help Samoa achieve its climate goals, but also Ms. Pizita Simi, of course, CEO of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and Honorable Prime Minister Fiame Mataafa, who of course was the Deputy Prime Minister when this partnership began. We're so excited to see that leadership continue, and the progress that you all are making that are really helping inform how other governments achieve their climate goals. So High Commissioner Faturi, thank you so much for joining us. Francesca, so appreciative that you were able to join us and provide your insight into the global, our global understanding of those SIDS partnerships that must be replicated and scaled. Thank you for your work and continued innovation. Nick, my dear buddy, thank you again for joining us, man. Of course, Nick at Grid Market are not just spearheading Samoa's national energy transition, but as we talked about with St. Martin, are spearheading that as well for those energy companies and financial institutions interested in participating in St. Martin's historic national energy transition. Please reach out to Nick and Grid Market, who'll be spearheading that effort hand in hand with the government of St. Martin. And finally, Dr. Friday, again, so appreciative you're able to join us, chair of the Island Resilience Partnership, which of course is helping lead these partnerships in Samoa, in St. Martin, and finding ways to replicate those partnerships, but also spearheading innovative financing. We talked about kind of the large funds and those opportunities that Nigel Topping is exploring at COP26. But Dr. Friday, just real quick before we go, I know you also have been working on platforms that allow for really the world to participate in the energy transitions of governments. Can you briefly touch on that platform that you're developing?
Very quickly, particularly with COVID-19, we see that the whole world is working very differently now, and people are using electronic platforms for a whole range of transactions. So we believe that there's space for disruption to make it a lot more efficient to get money from where there's a lot of money to where money is needed, particularly for the blue economy and for the green economy and for island economies in general. So I think watch this space, and we'll have more to say on that in due course.
At the next Virtual Island Summit. No, I love that. Well, again, Dr. Friday, thank you for joining us. Thank my distinguished speakers for participating. And with that, we will transition to our next segment for our session. I'm going to hand over the moderating duties to Isabel Valdez, who, of course, is the project and account manager at Island Innovation. She grew up in the Navarino Islands, Chile's most southerly inhabited island in the sub-Antarctic, and talking today from Guatemala. She leads the Island Innovation Ambassador Program, which has been going for a couple years. Right now, I think there are over 400 Island Innovation Ambassadors who are part of this network. Is that right, Isabel?
Yes, that's right.
That's incredible. And I know you're going to be leading a brilliant intergenerational conversation about Highlands are achieving its climate goals. So with that, thank you for joining us, and the floor is yours, my friend.
Okay, thank you so much, Matt. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you. I'm Isabel Godoy, Project and Account Manager at Island Innovation. Since last year, I have faced the challenge of coordinating the Island Innovation Ambassador Program. We work with diverse rural and island communities around the world to develop solutions for sustainable development. Island Innovation uses its global network to find innovative solutions through modern technology and share good practices. In 2020, we had the honor of having the participation of about 150 ambassadors, and in 2021, we have about 400 ambassadors in our network. More than just a number, I want to highlight that they are people with different backgrounds. CEOs, founders of organizations, members of the government, such as majors of islands. We also have university and high school students, teachers, doctors, and people who are simply interested in connecting with other islanders. They have voluntarily decided to be part of this program and give us their time to make their islands visible. During the last months, we have carried out multiple virtual hubs to be inspired and introduced to global ideas surrounding sustainability and climate change. The hubs has brokered connections between business decision makers and local governments. Applied the concept of the virtual summit locally. Based on our constant work in monthly meetings and training sessions, we highly experienced trainers. The contribution of all our ambassadors has been very important because we have been able to discuss the multiple problems related to the environment in the islands that often require innovative solutions. In my opinion, I think to be innovative, it doesn't mean that we need to create everything from scratch or reinvent things. It is very important to rigorously study all practices to find better ones. I think that knowing how to face problems from another perspective whilst constantly learning is a good start to face frustration and try different ideas. It is very important to understand technology as a benefit to provide well-being to the community while being aware of the environment and reducing its impact. So today, I want to introduce you 3 ambassadors who are working to contribute innovative and sustainable ideas to their communities. Emilio de Jesus from Dominican Republic, Saidia Afrin from the Global Ocean Institute, SID's representative, and Stan Wolfgram from Cook Islands. Emilio has experience working on renewable energy for his island. This year, we held a virtual hub in Dominican Republic on smart cities, and it was a great success. I would like to ask you, Emilio, how has information through the Island Innovation Network and Ambassador Program been applied to create change on your island?
Hello, Isabel. Good morning, and good morning to everyone who's watching. To answer your question, I guess I'm going to show a little bit of my screen. Let's see. Let me know if you can see it.
Yes, we can see your screen. Okay,
perfect. So before I even introduce myself, I want to give you guys a little bit of context of who I am and what are the lenses that I use to, filter my vision and what moves me. And this is coming from one of my favorite movies, which is called Inception, in which the quote goes like this: "What is the most resilient parasite? A bacteria, a virus, an intestinal worm, an idea, resilient, highly contagious. Once an idea has taken hold of the brain, it's almost impossible to eradicate. An idea that is fully formed, fully understood, sticks right there somewhere." And basically an idea that is stuck in my head since I graduated back in 2015 is the fact that my country, my beautiful island, is one of the most vulnerable countries in the world to climate change. In fact, it is the 10th most vulnerable country to climate change. That's why when James Ellsmore, the creator of Island Innovation back in 2019, when he contacted me, because of that idea was already rooted, it was no hesitation. I thought to myself, this platform, this Island Innovation platform, is a place in which I can develop that idea and share it with my colleagues and partners across the Caribbean and the world. Right now, as you can see in the screen, I'm leading a research called Resiliency Analysis for the Development of Microgrid Architecture Against Climate-Driven Events in the Dominican Republic Systems. And there's two big ideas embedded in this research. One is called resiliency. As you might know, resiliency in the electric networks is just the ability for the network to prevent and then recuperate or bounce back once this transformative event happens. Like it could be an earthquake, man-made server attack, or whatever. And the microgrid is just a tool. It's just a small segment of critical load that, because of the characteristic, can enhance resiliency. So I'm aiming towards developing the ability, or the hypothesis is that we will be able to develop the ability to enhance the resilience of our beautiful island. And in that way, we wouldn't suffer the catastrophes that Puerto Rico suffered back in 2017 when Olga and Irma, the hurricanes. And yeah, back in 2020, sorry, when the Virtual Island Summit was running, that pulled me on a path, I guess, being part of a vision that is not yours, that is someone else's. And when you internalize that vision, when you put it in your thought process, that kind of moves you, right? And through that vision, the Island Innovation Ambassador Program, I got the idea of internalizing that ambassador program into one of my pet projects, I guess. Energia Journal is a platform that I run with one of my colleagues, in which it's a portal to the most relevant information to the world of energy and water and sustainability in my island. We just launched this program called Embajadores de Energía, which basically means that we are looking for leaders that are committed to the vision of the energy transition in our island. And that because they have the ability and the knowledge to help in that transition, they will be embedded into the mission of Energia Journal, that the overall vision is to inspire the good use of energy. And what are those ambassadors doing? Well, they're using their knowledge, their skills to create content, to create ideas, to connect people, to do networking workshops and do collaborative projects with government and NGOs. And by doing those projects, they'll be able to, help and transition to a more sustainable economy and sustainable country. And at the end, the main idea that drives my vision and the lenses that I use is that I truly, truly believe in the idea of transactive grid, on the idea that we can have a decarbonized, decentralized, and digitized grid. So thank you very much, James, for, without knowing, putting me in the path of understanding how important it is to be into someone else's vision and then to deliver that vision. Thank you. If you guys, this is the last part, I guess. These are the first two ambassadors of the movement, I guess, of Energy Journal. Leslie was one of my first students when I began to teach at the university, and Christopher is just graduated of engineering. So very young professionals, but very driven, and that's what you need when you want to move ideas forward. You need vision, you need freshness, I guess. And if anyone is interested in the research I'm conducting on microgrids and resiliency and in the Dominican Republic, or any other ideas on how to grow the energy ambassadors, feel free to contact me at those emails that I'm sharing in the screen. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Emilio, for that. So I would like to know, what do you expect the scope of the energy ambassador to be?
Oh, you said. Isabel, can you repeat that?
Okay, so the question is, what do you expect the scope of the energy ambassadors be?
Of course. So right now, at the moment, we want these professionals to be involved in our day-to-day operations, meaning that in Energy Journal, we have a podcast with legislators, regulators, and innovators in the country. We want them to be part of that conversation, for them to learn what is actually going on in the industry, but also to be able to create opinions around that. So we have a blog in which new ambassadors will be actively working on, and also in the whole process of doing the research to be able to do podcasting. At the end, it seems like an easy job, but it's not. This is the current scope. However, we plan in the future to have like an organization that we can organize workshops, we can train these professionals to do various types of.
Oops. Okay, I think we lost Emilio. So, okay, thank you very much, Emilio, for all the information you provide us today. I want to mention that some of the ambassadors of the program have worked collaborating on projects to promote measures in their islands, sending letters to the governments, creating scientific articles together, organizing island innovation hubs to transfer general knowledge locally. They have been able to meet physically when the measures have allowed. It seems there are islands that have had very controlled cases of COVID-19. But furthermore, one of the ambassadors of the program has won a scholarship for postgraduate studies on island that we have promoted in our network. So, okay, now I would like to invite Saidi Afrin, who is a Small Islands Developing States representative at the Global Ocean Institute. I will ask you the same question, Saidi. How has information through the Island Innovation Network and Ambassador Program been applied to create change on your island? Oh, Saidi, we cannot hear you, so. Oh, I think you are having audio issues.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay. Thank you, Isabel, and everybody on the program. Back to the question in relation to, a network basically, and how we are trying to move support for island countries. Basically, I have been focusing on SDG movement in relation to research that's going to inform island leaders and island young professionals, especially all those SDG targets and goals that has been specifically negotiated for island countries in the field of oceans, SDG 14.7 that specifically speaks for SIDS, increasing economic benefits to small island developing countries. So how do we do that? What are the mechanisms? And how will this be framed within the governance reform of island governments? So this is some of the work that I have been working with, and the network has been very interesting in some of the ways where we are also testing how industry, especially in this sector, energy, industry and technology partners are partnering with policymakers, researchers, and the young professionals. We cannot forget the young professionals, and a lot of our challenges in our previous SIDS, multiple UN-led conferences has been that we are always very tight in consultation and bringing young people in really building the leadership for them to move ahead for the next generation. So key learnings for this over the year and just seeing multiple topics coming through, and getting young people to come on a platform to speak what's happening in the islands and keeping the momentum going on various topics, especially on climate change, SDG movement, which is another part of this network section, and industry, science, academia linkage, which is where I had been focusing on, has been one of the unique pieces of this network, where we are talking to industry people, and at the same time, young people are able to see how fourth industrial revolution has kicked in and what will be bigger changes in the job market, especially under SDG 8, future for jobs. What will be the requirements for occupational health and safety? All of this is what SDG interlinkages study allows us today to look at it and study and actually get the young people on board to become the future policy-led advocates. So that's my piece on this network, and I also would like to thank James and their team on this initiatives. Thank you.
Okay, that's really good. Thank you very much, Saidi. I think the perspective you have raised is very important. So I will finally invite Stano Wolfgram of Tongan Cook Islands, a heritage-funded drum production as a trader company. So I will ask you the same question, Stan. How has information through the Island Innovation Network and Ambassador Program been applied to create change on your island?
So, kia rana, malolole, vigets, nice to meet you. I'm going to share my screen and just share a little bit with you. So you can see my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Okay, so pleased to meet you. My name is Stan Wolfgram. I'm a Tongan Cook Island German. I'm actually born in New Zealand, but I now reside in the Cook Islands. I formed a company which is called Drum Productions. And so this is the Cook Islands. So you can see we're very much in the middle of the South Pacific. So we're quite an isolated nation. We're at least 3.5 hours from New Zealand, but we're very, very much isolated where we are. 15 islands within the Cook Islands. I formed a company around 30 years ago. It's called Drum Productions. So we're a strategic development company. So we work in the area of social enterprise, education, corporate relations, major events, primetime media production. I'm a storyteller. So I work in telling Pacifica stories. We work with grassroots, community, national, regional, global governments, private sector, NGOs. The mission statement for our company to create a Pacifica voice, or to create for Pacifica peoples a valued voice in our own backyard. Now, that was our mission statement 30 years ago. It's even more relevant now today. Our philosophy. So our philosophy summarized by a Maori proverb. He aha te mea nui o te ao. What is the most important thing in the world? He tangata, he tangata, he tangata. It is the people, it is the people, it is the people. And that's very much the philosophy that we work on with our business. Now, island innovation, information. So yeah, our interactions, the information that we've gained through the various ways that we're interacting with island innovations has just been, I mean, it's been overwhelming. It's been mind-blowing. It's been exciting. It's been innovative. It's been daunting at times. So for us, we had to do a little bit of a map. So we created a word cloud. We basically, from the word cloud, we pulled out themes for us as far as our philosophy is concerned. So for us, collectives, we could see we're very strong from what we got with our engagements, island innovation, the importance of collectives, understanding the playing field, so recognizing agendas, lenses, people's perspectives, the people's perspectives, values, people's values, aligned values with organizations that we work with, interactions. Very important were leaders, mentors. Very important were the issues, very varied issues, and also the needs, and also disruption, and how disruption became a very important part of the engagement that we had with others. And then the final thing was actually action. How do we get to action? What motivates us into action and impact? So a little more about us. So we've used island innovation interactions for validation of our projects. So Drum Productions built a cultural innovation hub in the Cook Islands to capacity build SMEs sustained by Indigenous story, cultural exchange, ecotourism, and trade. So these are the areas that we work in. Other areas that we found to catalyze that work that we do around innovation hubs is we look at the impact of digital literacy, digital equity, platform from commercial audiovisual sector. So we ran projects around film, etc., storytelling, digital storytelling. Other sectors we looked at was the agricultural sector. We looked at how we could add value to that sector, impact the agricultural diversification platform through traditional medicines, natural cosmetics. So we've looked in that area as well. Another area, or the most important area to us at the moment now, is ocean conservation, climate change, platform from a commercial touring exhibition and digital conservation. So for us, we've entered into this space. We realize the importance of the digital sector, especially in this COVID world at the moment. For us, we've entered in around digital conservation. The ocean for us, we have a saying, I am the ocean is me. We needed to see how we could still engage in the conversation of climate change, ocean degradation. So we built an app, a mobile app, which actually makes users guardians of 2 kilometre square pieces of ocean sanctuary. So it teaches them around MPAs and marine protected areas. But it's our way of reaching past the converted. It's our way of going global. It's a global app. It's about oceans all around the world. It's for people that know the ocean's sick. They want to learn more. They want to get together with like-minded others and do something. We work with a collective of conservationists that are working on the ground. And we're very much, the app has just gone live about a day ago. So for us, this is the way that we've engaged with ocean, with island innovation. And it's just amazing how complex the issues are, but then how much information and the variety of people that we can engage with on the platform. So yeah, that's us. So thanks to James, and thanks to the rest of you guys.
Okay, thank you so much, Stan, for this intervention. So many thanks to all of the ambassadors for their fantastic intervention. I wish you the best in your project. It's a real pleasure for me to be surrounded by people who inspire a lot to create change and who give a lot of them to contribute to our program. So I will share my screen. So I would like to show you some pictures about the ambassador program. So you can see here pictures of this year program, what we do during the year, in the training sessions, in the ambassador meetups. So a lot of people engaged in our program. So thank you to all of you who have participated in the Bertel and the Island Innovation Ambassador Program. So if you want to contact me, this is my email. And if you want to know more about the Ambassador Program, feel free to contact me. So now it's the turn to present a case study. applying knowledge from global island networks in Martha's Vineyard. The discovery process was created as a way to elevate the experience of the ambassadors in the Virtual Island Summit and the level of innovative impact that they have on their islands. So I will invite Bob Johnson, the director of the Strategy Innovation Group and Vineyard Future Works, Joseph Gamel, managing partner of Synetics World and founder of the Imagine Corps, and Philip Wallace, executive director of the Vineyard Open Land Foundation. So, Bob, up to you.
Wonderful, Isabel. Thanks so much. And our thanks to James, Sarah, Isabel, and the whole Island Innovation team for giving us this opportunity to share valuable lessons and insights on breakthrough innovation and the opportunity to participate in this impressive panel and conversation. As Isabel mentioned, presenting with me will be Phil Wallace, Executive Director of the Vineyard Open Lands Foundation and co-leader with Christine Todd of the Martha's Vineyard Discovery Team. Also with us is Joe Gamel, Managing Partner for Synetics World and the founder of Imagine Corps. What do all of us attending the Island Innovation Summit have in common? I suggest, while there are many, two stand out. First, a deep affection for an island, and second, a heartfelt desire for a preferred future for our island while confronted by climate change and other threats. If true, this suggests we have another thing in common. As Ted Levitt has declared, we must innovate. To quote, just as energy is the basis of life itself and ideas the source of innovation, so is innovation the vital spark of all human change, improvement, and progress. And when it comes to climate change, it is not an overstatement for many of us to say, innovate or die. On Martha's Vineyard, one approach we were using to innovate is a proven methodology for innovation, the discovery process. What is the discovery process? Most simply, it is a way to transform new knowledge, like we learn at a summit, into breakthrough innovation through collaboration. So instead of a summit being only a stimulating and intellectual experience, it becomes a springboard to creating new value for our islands. Entering last year's summit, 30 vineyarders met in advance and organized themselves into a discovery team. They created a plan for how to optimize their summit learnings and insights and scheduled an insight session following the summit to identify ways to create new innovative value for Martha's Vineyard. In a few minutes, Phil will share with you our discovery process experiment for this year's summit. But using innovation to create a preferred future for an island isn't easy. It's hard work. And when we look at creating that future for our islands, there's really two mindsets, two skill sets that we can use to be successful. Our experience over the last 40 years, give or take, is that you cannot create your island's future the way you might plan a successful public works project for today. It requires a different skill set and mindset. All these attributes of what it takes to successfully sustain our islands with today's issues and challenges are absolutely important and valuable, but they will not be the catalyst or inspiration for future breakthrough solutions. Solutions for our island's biggest threats like climate change, affordable housing, sustainable agriculture, and many more will require the attributes noted for creating the future of islands. It will require creativity, require being insights driven with experiences like this summit. An island-wide approach versus what potholes do we fill and which do we fill first. It will require iterative leaps of imagination, not simply a linear formula. It will require future-back planning from a preferred scenario, creating new value and delivering that new value in new ways. It takes a proven approach like the discovery process to escape the gravity and business as usual thinking of today to create a new future. IBM Research used the discovery process to 2x its value to IBM. Carl Zeiss used the discovery process to create a new global vision, pun intended. Procter & Gamble used the discovery process to make its products more environmentally friendly. Now, as an experiment, we are using the discovery process to create new value for Martha's Vineyard and other islands. James and Isabel invited Strategy Innovation Group to introduce the discovery process at a workshop to these 400 new island innovation ambassadors way back in January. Following the workshop, 110 ambassadors signed up from 61 islands to participate in a monthly program in parallel to the ambassador program. One of the things that we invited them to share with us is, what are their imperatives? What are the things that they would most want to focus the discovery process on? And this is word art that illustrates what all the ambassadors came up with. Of course, these are the usual suspects. This upfront alignment really does matter. And what we've experienced is that as teams move through the discovery process, the deeper the alignment for a team, the more what we call future pull is created. And with future pull, that positive impact for the future happens faster. So metaphorically, this is how we've tried to capture what the Vineyard team and what some of these other islands are moving through. We all have a home island, and on that home island, as with both Vineyard teams, we do a process for staging, preparing for success, and aligning on what we most want to achieve and what our focus is on our home island. And then we move through an exploring phase, and that exploring phase includes experiences like this summit. In fact, for the Vineyard and for other islands, this summit is the most important island we'll be stopping at during the exploring phase. And then the other islands are creating, inventing their post-summit, and then of course, creating a roadmap of positive impact as we move back to our home island. So now Phil's going to share with you some of the experience that we've had this year. Phil?
Thank you, Bob. And thank you, Joe, following me, and Isabel and James for giving us the platform to both learn and to share our experience on the Vineyard. I'm going to pick up on a couple of themes from Bob and also from Stan. What we're really all trying to do is create that springboard, as Bob said, that future pull towards a new future. How do we do that? And here on Martha's Vineyard Island, our challenge was, how do we engage as many, if not all, those on this island community? We're small, 20,000 people full-time, but 800,000 who come here during the summer and during the season. So like many of you, we see this extraordinary expansion of consumption. How do we manage that amongst the issues of climate change, sustainable agriculture, and housing? That was our challenge. And so we decided literally a year ago, thanks to Bob, who found out about the Island Innovation Summit, we decided, let's ring the bell, get as many people together as we can. And 30 people showed up, 8 of whom decided we're in with Isabel's ambassador group. We really don't know what we're doing, but we're going to jump in and start swimming with the rest of the folks. It ended up being, as Bob said, 110 people. We decided that on our island, there was enough momentum, sort of a burgeoning embryonic movement around climate change, of which Bob was already involved in. We were going to let that process continue on, encourage it, but focus on the other issues that create our sustainable and healthy quality of life here on Martha's Vineyard. We identified about 6 months ago, 15 different topics. Oh, we couldn't possibly handle managing that. So we decided, let's pick 3. And we decided, because we are 6 towns that really have a hard time getting aligned around issues of climate change and other sustainability issues, that island governance was a critical one, that we needed to continue to talk about how to work together. Now, many of you out there are part of a nation state and maybe don't have that issue, but for those of you who suffer from competing entities that are trying to get alignment, this is an absolutely crucial issue for any of our island communities. The second was that if we don't focus on the youth, the next generation that is coming up through our high schools and through new unemployment, we're going to have brain drain. We're not going to actually focus on the right potential careers that will have sustainable impacts. And so Joe is going to tell you a little bit about that in a couple of minutes. And lastly, we decided that the community of arts and culture was an incredible medium for creative thinking, for expression of these issues to the public, and ways to engage others through both the medium of art and actually the enjoyment and recreation of fellowship. And so we took those 3 issues and worked them hard over the past couple of months. We brought together a nucleus of people, 10 or 12 around each, and many of those are participating in the summit right now. Stan Wolfgram, I want to thank you for your thinking around Cook Islands. How do you get strategic priorities set? How do you get like-minded people to show up and join in the conversation? I want to look at your website, because I just learned something today, and this is why an island innovation is important. I also learned that connecting with other islands was important. And indeed, we've started work with St. Thomas around how dance can inform multiple cultures and bring races, cultures, and economies together. The Netherlands is now part of our loose confederation of arts and culture, learning how tourism and the impacts of seasonal economies can positively impact arts and culture. And lastly, looking to nearby islands and coastal communities. We have an island, Nantucket, that shares similar issues to us, and the coastal communities of Cape Cod, which has an exceptional Cape Cod Commission and just completed a climate action plan that we're going to lean on. Those experiences, both sharing and learning from, and that iterative communication are absolutely critical, we believe, to the success of sustainability on Martha's Vineyard. Joe, I'm going to turn it over.
Please, could you make sure that these are in full screen mode? And also just a reminder, we have 2 minutes to wrap up. Okay, thanks.
Joe, over to you.
Joe, you are on mute, so.
Are they in full screen mode now?
Yes.
the experiment that we've been working on and bringing forth in Martha's Vineyard is a concept called Imagine Core, which really at the heart of it is these two natures, nurturing the collaborative problem-solving talent of our youth, but also then pairing them with nonprofits in the community to have impact today. This has happened episodically on the island with no plastic or plastic bottle-free initiative the last several years. It's taken years to actually take hold. How can we create the right environment for this to happen within our youth on an ongoing basis? So the possibility aspect is sharing concepts and tools around climate, how we treat each other, how we treat ideas, how we treat ourselves. We can be the most punishing. And then working on key initiatives to drive those forward. Over time, the idea is the more challenges that are successfully achieved, the more young people that are involved in these programs, the more resilient they become individually and the more resilient the community becomes. There's been some wonderful examples of this from creating a new program during the COVID years to help students learn in a COVID remote environment, to creating ways for heartsick families to connect more deeply. So these are all nonprofits. Impact in the community, but then personally impact on the individuals, that their ideas matter and that they individually can make a difference. So these are the dreams. We talked about dreams, and one of our panelists talked about that inception idea. Imagine Core has been that for me personally and for many of us now, to bring forth not only in Martha's Vineyard, but now to offer it potentially to our islands around the world, the way we have the discovery process in this last year. So with that, you know, it's not an easy process working through a culture within the island and the right stakeholders to make it come to fruition. But we're excited to be piloting it now at Martha's Vineyard and look to engage with you, not only on youth and engagement and empowerment, but on the other initiatives that Phil talked about and how we might use the discovery process collaboratively to make a difference.
Okay, thank you so much, Bob, Phil, and Joe. It was a really, really good intervention. So you have worked very hard discussing and being pioneers in inserting new discussion concept with our ambassadors. So your contribution has been very valuable to us. And now we will continue. So Matt, back to you.
Thank you, Isabel. Thank you, Joe, Phil, and Bob for an excellent presentation. And of course, congratulations to the entire Island Innovation Ambassador Program, running strong at 400 plus. And I've seen in the comments, a lot of people inquiring about how they can get involved and apply. It looks like that program will be up for application later in the year, but there is, of course, a wait list for those who are interested in getting at the front of that line. Now, for our final segment for this session, I'll be rejoined by my compatriot, Hita Lakhani, Youngo's Global South Focal Point, and we have the privilege to conclude this with an interview with my dear friend, Lynn McBee, CEO of EarthX. Lynn, how are you?
I'm good, Matt. How are you doing this morning?
Doing well, doing well. Happy Sunday.
Absolutely, it is. It's Sunday morning.
You know, we this event kicked off with an interview with Prime Minister Jacobs talking about St. Martin's national energy transition and the partnership that they created. Of course, this partnership originated at EarthX, the organization. Right. You were at the helm back in, you know, as a history lesson, back in 2019. The last time during Earth Day that organizations were actually having large gatherings. This is, of course, the last Earth Day that was pre-COVID. We had the Island Resilience Forum, and that was where Ambassador Faturi announced the partnership with the independent state of Samoa, also coming out of EarthX. And so, you know, we talk about, you know, we're highlighting all these governments around the world, from the Pacific to the Caribbean, all of whom are building innovative partnerships to achieve their climate goals. And it looks like all roads are leading through EarthX. So I'd love for you to share some background on what EarthX is. And of course, over the years, it's been around for a little over a decade now. How has it evolved?
Sure, and be happy to. So EarthX was founded by Trammell Crow, a visionary philanthropist here in Dallas, over 10 years ago. And his idea really was to bring all different voices, all sides of the issues, all perspectives to the table to discuss sustainability, climate change, how we just all live together and take care of our world. And it's had many different iterations because climate change in some ways has forced us to think about doing our business differently via COVID and some of the things. So if you go back to 2019 and you talk about the wonderful work, Trammell fell in love with the people that you brought, and he wanted to help. And so he was, proud to play a role in those energy transitions. And then in, 2020, we went virtual and we partnered with National Geographic. And through that, it became less about convening and connecting, but it became about amplifying a message on a very big scale. And so we started EarthX TV. So pre-COVID, we were always about convening people. We had 170,000 people over at Fair Park. We had conferences, we told stories, we brought folks together, we discussed issues. But when COVID started, we couldn't bring 170,000 people together. So that birthed EarthX TV, which we're very proud of, which is a streaming channel that I hope people will download the app and tune in for. And we're going to be producing lots of good content, telling lots of stories, because we know that storytelling is the way to get a message across. So we're really excited to continue, collaborating, highlighting issues, but really starting to quantify our impact. And through storytelling, how are we leading to people changing their behaviors, to policy changes, to really getting people involved in the issues. So it's been quite a journey over these last 11 years, but we will, of course, have an expo and have conferences next spring, but this EarthX TV, we're doubling down on, so.
Yeah, I love that. And I know Hita has a question, but I just wanted to comment on that. It's been, of course, every organization in the world that had organized in-person convenings when the pandemic hit was forced to pivot. I know at March for Science, of course, our theory of change was built around, in-person public demonstrations that were used not as finish lines of advocacy, but really as a launching pad for sustained engagement. And watching EarthX innovate over the last 18 months, from taking its conferences and putting them online to really beginning to understand the power of media as a medium, and looking at finding ways to not just build an audience, but enlist that audience into getting involved. And so I know EarthX is not just beginning to acquire a great deal of environmental content, but is beginning to produce its own original programming and series. Road to Glasgow, is a great example of original EarthX series, helping explain the role of COP and how young people are getting involved and the role that they have in that. But to that point, speaking of young people and getting involved in COP, Hita, who of course represents the official youth constituency of the COPs, has our next question.
Thank you, Matt. Lynn, it's an absolute pleasure to have you with us today. Like Matt mentioned, and everything that you're doing with EarthX is absolutely amazing to see how you've changed and also picked up and continued keeping pace. But in addition to all of that, you're also a trained scientist, a philanthropist, a civic leader, and you've spent your career giving back. And now that you're a CEO of EarthX that is helping nations to achieve their climate goals, what advice would you give your 13-year-old self? Looking back.
Yeah, of course. When I think back about being 13, which was quite some time ago, I was a very curious child and always outside with nature, running around, collecting bugs, doing things that weren't conventional for girls at that time. And so I would say that if you find yourself doing things that interest you and inspire you, but maybe aren't conventional, keep doing those things, because that's where your passions lie. And it's really important to, understand where your passions lie and to, set your goals and then to make decisions that are going to move you towards those goals. So when you're doing different things and getting involved in different things, really do think, is this moving me towards my goal of what I want to achieve? But, staying passionate, staying driven, finding good mentors and people that you can look up to. And, I've really enjoyed, this morning and hearing from so many young people, and also, folks that would be or are good mentors. And so, find those people that, will help you get where you need to be an active listener, say yes more than you say no. And, your life will be rich, and it will lead you to succeed and to do a lot of really interesting things and meet a lot of really cool people.
I love that. Building a career around your passions.
Yeah, definitely.
Lynn, as we wrap up, wanted to kind of give you this final question. Obviously, EarthX has done a lot over the years. As we kind of look towards next spring for EarthX 2022, where do you go from here? What is the future of EarthX?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So we are planning, next spring for a hybrid model event where we will bring conferences and people together. We hope that we will have island resiliency, and we'll have a lot of different things that will address issues that we've discussed this morning. So we'll have that conference piece. We'll also, probably have a hackathon and have a film festival. And of course, all of that will be amplified on our EarthX TV, our streaming channel. So we're really excited about, again, not just convening and but through convening, taking action and having impact, because we've done a lot of convening and a lot of great things in the past 10 years, but it's now time to, take action and make things happen. So we're excited about April. We hope that everyone here will join us in April to some degree, either on EarthX TV or of course, Trammell Crow would invite everybody to Dallas because he is a very hospitable man. And so it's going to be a wonderful event. Maybe not 170,000 people, but it will be a great gathering.
Yeah, and I know, primarily outdoors, and really leaning into, how can you create in-person convenings during a pandemic that are as safe as possible, while also providing opportunities for people around the world to actively participate, from participating in sessions to, of course, being a part of an engaged and interactive audience. No, I love that. And, Lynn, one thing I'm really excited about with what EarthX has done and continues to do is it's embracing the UN's Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, as a framework to really inform not just those priorities that the world needs to address, but providing those indicators so that we can measure success. EarthX has been a leader in this space for a long time. And, for those who haven't yet been or participated in EarthX, really what Trammell Crow is building in Dallas is, turning Dallas into the Davos of the environmental movements around every Earth Day and Earth Week. And so really excited as the EarthX team continues to find ways to not just convene people, but coordinate them and catalyze impact, so that the kinds of transformative change like the National Energy Transition Partnerships with Samoa and St. Martin really represents just the beginning. So
absolutely.
Lynn, thank you for helping close us out. We
of course
so appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yes. Hita, any last words that you'd like to share?
Yeah, thank you so much for everyone for coming here today, for being with us, for the extremely enriching conversation that we've had over the last couple of hours. For everyone who's looking and who's under the age of 35 and is looking to join Youngo once again, with the official youth constituency, which means we're the mandated mechanism within the UN framework for youth to engage on climate change related issues. So come join us. We'll be more than happy to have you. And let's all keep working together collectively for our planet. Thank you.
I love that, Hita. And the last thing, of course, to say is thank you to James, Sarah, Isabel, and the entire Island Innovation team for making this possible. It was an absolute pleasure and privilege being with you all today. And congratulations on an excellent virtual Island Summit. Thanks, everybody.